Our movie starts by introducing us to Sarah, a French astronaut who's been training as a backup for years. And now she is told she will be a late addition for the Proxima crew, an International Space Station mission. And today she's taking her final medical test, and she'll officially join the Proxima crew. And as she expected, she passes all her tests without a problem, and she is now part of the crew. And Sarah lives with her daughter Stella, and she's separated with her ex-husband Thomas, but they're still on good terms. And Thomas is an astrophysicist, and he also works for the French space program. And as she was having a bath, Stella asks Sarah if Sarah would die before her. And Sarah explains that almost all parents die before their children, and it's a very normal thing. You see, Sarah's very honest with her daughter, and she wants to raise a very independent and very pragmatic kid. And the next morning, Sarah meets up with Thomas, and she tells him that she's been accepted to go to space. And he seems very happy for her, and they hug it out. And she met up with him not only to tell him that she's going to space, but for another reason as well. And that reason is, Sarah is very worried to leave Stella for when she leaves for her year-long mission. And Sarah is also worried that she won't have friends on her new school, and that she'll need someone to look after her. And Thomas is offended that Sarah thinks that he won't be able to look after his own daughter, and Sarah explains that he might be too busy and that she's worried. And Thomas assures her that he'll be able to take care of Stella, and she'll live with him for when Sarah leaves for space. And Sarah meets the other crew members, and one of them is Mike from America. And he's an experienced astronaut, and he'll be leading the mission. And Mike gives a speech about the mission, and this mission is a very special one because this is the last mission before humanity goes to Mars. And he talks about his team, and he makes this really unnecessary joke about how they have a female French astronaut with them, and that's cool because French women can cook. And Sarah's not happy with that comment, and she tells everyone that she wanted to be an astronaut since she was 8, and her mom told her that girls can't do that because they're girls, and she proved her wrong by actually becoming one. And the next day, Sarah takes Stella to work, and they meet up with Wendy, an administrator that will look after Stella after she's traveled to space. And then we see Sarah and her daughter go to the river, and Stella releases her pet fish free. And then they go to Thomas's place, and Stella goes to her room, and Sarah and Thomas start talking. And Sarah is scared that the new school will keep Stella back a year. And here we learn that Stella has dyslexia and other learning disabilities, and that especially makes her really bad at math. I wonder if I'm dyslexic. Tom tells Sarah not to worry too much and that Stella will be okay. And they all go out for a last dinner before Sarah leaves for Russia. And after dinner, Sarah promises Stella that she'll see her in 3 weeks before Sarah goes to quarantine before leaving Earth. Because apparently the astronauts do their training and they have to stay in quarantine for 3 weeks before they go to space. Because if they're infected with something and they infect everybody else and they're in space, it's pretty difficult. So that's why they put them in quarantine. Sarah puts Stella to sleep and says goodbye to Thomas as well, and she arrives in Russia. And the next day, she meets up with her other crewmate, Russian astronaut Anton. And Anton takes Sarah to meet up with Mike again, and Mike tells Sarah to request for a lighter training, and she's again offended because she's a female and that's why he said that to her. And Mike tells her not to take this personally, and he's not saying this because she's a woman. Yeah, he was saying that because she's a woman. Sarah leaves angry, and she goes for her first training. And she's training in a simulated environment to experience what it would be like to be in space. And she does well on her first exercise, but after she gets out, she runs to the bathroom and she vomits. And after that, she gets a call from Stella, and she tells her she's not making any friends and that she can't do math. And Sarah comforts her, and she reassures Stella that she'll be okay. Because that's what all mothers do, they reassure their daughters, even though they have a learning disability. And after being a really good mom, Sarah goes back to training. And this time she gets tested underwater wearing her spacesuit. And she's given 3 minutes to do the exercise, and she accomplishes it very well. And Mike is surprised and he congratulates her. And this is where Mike starts to see Sarah's determination and starts to gain respect for her.
Wait, hold on. Did you subscribe to our channel? Come on guys, you're here, you're watching the video. Help us out by hitting the subscribe button, as it really helps out me and my team to make more videos for you guys. And now, let's get back to the recap.
And it's now 50 days to liftoff, and Sarah's recording her improvement during her time in Russia. And she's also training herself in her spare time to be more prepared for the mission. And she sends her training progress and her diary to Stella. And it's now the last week before the training ends, and the astronauts go into quarantine before liftoff. And this is also the end of the 3rd week when Stella can can see Sarah too. And Sarah goes into the forest with Mike and Anthony for their last exercise. And Stella was waiting with Wendy to see her mother, but Sarah was late and she finally got there and she needed to go to another meeting. And Sarah asks permission for Stella to join the meeting so she can spend time with her. And while in the meeting, Stella gets bored and she runs away from the building. And Sarah goes out to find her and she sees Stella with Wendy. And Wendy tells her that she just went to the park, and Stella is very upset with Sarah and she just wants to go back to her dad. And Sarah had to go back to the meeting. Wendy took Stella to her hotel. And Sarah and Mike got into an argument of the way she raises her child, and he tells her to cut the cord now with her daughter since she'll be leaving for a year anyways. And when Sarah got back to the hotel, Stella was already asleep and Sarah sleeps next to her. And in the morning, Wendy takes Stella while Sarah is asleep, and Stella goes back without saying goodbye to her mother. And Sarah is now back at the camp for her last medical checkup, and she has a wound on her leg and it's not healing fast. And the doctor tells her to just take it slow and have some rest. And the pressure was getting to Sarah, and she calls Thomas and tells him crying that she might not be good enough for the mission. And Thomas comforts and reassures her and tells her she is good enough and that she'll be a good astronaut and the mission is gonna go great. And after this, she goes back to her room and she starts writing a heartfelt letter to Stella. And she writes how much she's gonna miss her while she's away in space. And after a little shopping, while walking back to the camp, Mike tells Sarah that she's doing a good job in training. And he confesses to her that he also faced difficulty the first time, and then he tells her that he thinks that she's a good mom. And soon, Sarah prepares her luggage for space, and she can only take about 1.5 kilograms of materials. And she packs memorabilia of Stella, and she takes a drawing from Stella's that was given to her, and she takes a video of the rain and she walks barefoot to remember Earth. And the next day, Sarah signs autographs and has the last press conference before going into quarantine. And this is also the last day she can see Stella in person. And she sees Wendy and asks where Stella is, and Wendy tells her that Stella and Thomas missed their flight and all the other flights are already full. And Sarah feels devastated because she can't see her daughter now. And she calls her on the phone, and Thomas tells her that they'll visit her in quarantine even though it's gonna be through a glass wall. And the next day, Stella arrives with Thomas, and Sarah was in quarantine, so they had to talk with a microphone through the glass. And Sarah asks her daughter how she is, but Stella doesn't respond. And Thomas leaves the room to give them some space to have a conversation. And Sarah asks her daughter to tell her something new about her life, and Stella reveals that she actually got an A in math. And Sarah is very proud of her, and she puts her hand on the wall, and Stella does the same thing. And it's a very intimate moment between a mother and her child. And Stella then tells her mother that she promised she would take her to see the rocket before she leaves. And then she tells her that it's okay that she went to quarantine, and she says goodbye and she just leaves. And at dawn, Sarah decides to sneak out of quarantine to see her daughter. And she gets out undetected, and she goes to the hotel Thomas and Stella were staying at, and Thomas was very confused and he asks her why she's here, and she just ignores him and wakes her daughter. And then she takes her to the rocket launch site. They see the rocket from afar and they say their final goodbyes, and Sarah takes her daughter back to the hotel. And after that, she sneaks back to her room and she takes a shower with a super cleaning soap because she actually broke quarantine protocol. And later that day, she wears her spacesuit and she joins Mike and Anthony to leave for the rocket. And when she gets in the bus, she sees Stella and Thomas through a window and she shows them a heart. You know, she makes a heart sign. And the Proxima team is finally in the rocket, and we see Sarah holding Stella's photo by her side. And when the rocket lifts off, we see Thomas crying and a smiling Stella watching her mother go to space. And that is how the movie ends. I hope you guys enjoyed this recap, and please leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and like the video. And I promise to see you guys on my next recap. Bye.